I'd like to take a moment to further discuss the idea of the concept of letting go. In this sequel to the first part of letting go, a better way of effecting change, I'd like to discuss the idea of what it means to let go, to further help you understand what I mean when I say to let go. First, I'd like to start by describing the human condition, or at least part of it. One of the things that we tend to do, and you may have noticed it in your own life, is that we tend to look back. We look at our history. We tend to live there, if you will. And oftentimes we put ourselves in a place where we categorize our lives by the things that we have done. Sometimes that means that we may think that we're bad people because we may have done bad things. Or maybe we have bad habits. Or maybe we think that we have an addictive personality because we've given in to addictions in the past. But that doesn't have to be true. Let's take, for example, a smoker. If you'll just role play with me and imagine that she has decided to quit smoking. She does very well for the first day. The second day, things become more trying and her anxiety gets the best of her, and she smokes a cigarette. In that moment, she may be feeling as if she's failed, and perhaps feel as if she should just give up, as if the effort is too hard, or perhaps that it's too late for her. She's gone too far and cannot go back. It's helpful to understand how the subconscious works. My work as a hypnotist, I help people to understand exactly what their subconscious is doing and how they can use the power of the subconscious to overcome bad habits or ways of thinking. You see, the subconscious is constantly living in each moment of our lives, whether that moment be in the past, in the present, or in the future. You can know what this feels like whenever you think back on a moment that brought you great joy. Perhaps a song induces a memory of a younger period of your life when you felt happiness, or a smell helps you to remember a time in your grandmother's kitchen, if that be the case. Oftentimes, we can even feel the physiology of those experiences. For example, if we remember a point in our lives when we were on a roller coaster or experienced something very exhilarating, we can begin to feel at least parts of the physiology of that experience. Just imagine that you were rolling off the edge of a roller coaster and taking that swift dive downward toward the ground. Experiences like these can help us to understand how the subconscious works. It's really no different than when the subconscious remembers what we used to be like when we did something we didn't want to do, when we gave in to an old bad habit. Let's pick on the smoker once again. So she smokes a cigarette once again and feels the disappointment of giving into that old bad habit. Something interesting happens when she lights the cigarette and may begin to feel that sense of failure. In that moment, something called a trigger is created, so that each time she lights up a cigarette, she may begin to feel that same emotion, just like the song on the radio, or perhaps like the smell of your grandma's kitchen. In that moment, the subconscious relives that sense of failure all over again. And when those same kinds of patterns of thought are consistently and persistently introduced, the subconscious begins to believe or accept the idea that she is a failure. And then a cycle begins, wherein the subconscious, because it believes it is a failure, begins to act like a failure, at least in the regard to using tobacco. But it can also have an effect on other parts of her life. It can begin to affect her career, her relationships, or simply just self-esteem. So the process of letting go is learning how to let go of the past, to realize that we have the power and the capacity to change, one step at a time. Remember that I said the subconscious lives in the present, whether the present, the moment, be in the past, the literal present, or the future. Let's pretend that she just lit up a cigarette, and of course feels those awful feelings of failing at her desire to quit. After she puts the cigarette out, she can introduce a new thought. I wonder if you'd be willing to give in to the idea that the moment you are not doing the thing that you do not want to do, like smoking or whatever the case may be, you're indeed succeeding in what you choose to do. So that if the smoker were to say something like, "I am an ex-smoker," as soon as she extinguishes the cigarette, it becomes true in that moment. And the more she lives there, the more she spends time focusing on that thought and reinforcing the idea that she is indeed an ex-smoker. Inevitably, the subconscious begins to believe it. And when the subconscious begins to believe that, then she begins to act like an ex-smoker. But it's important to take it one step further. In this process of letting go, anytime you create a vacuum in your life, anytime you let go of one thing, it's important to introduce something else, more positive. So to take it a step further, she could begin to imagine what her life is like as an ex-smoker. What does it mean to her to be an ex-smoker? What does it mean to be free of something an old habit, a thought, an event, a feeling, whatever that may be, how could one describe or define that moment, that experience, and begin imagining yourself just like that? How you walk and talk, how you live your life, the way you feel about yourself. And so you introduce a new trigger. So the thought of extinguishing the cigarette for the ex-smoker now becomes the point in her life when she can now make and introduce change. Because it is true indeed, the moment she extinguishes the cigarette, she is no longer smoking. And therefore, it can become true if you're willing to concede to the idea that she is now, in that moment, that second, that instant, an ex-smoker. And every moment going forward, she can continue to be an ex-smoker. And it can be as true as you choose to allow it to be. A part of you may be resistant to this idea or this concept, and I can understand why. We live in a world filled with categories. We tend to categorize everything in our lives, to put labels on ourselves and upon others. What would it be like to let go of that, to truly begin living? I appreciate the time you spent with me. As always, I hope that you'll like, share, and subscribe. And until next time, remember your potential.